It's lights out tonight on November 8th for the RLR podcast. We got another great lineup of topics for you guys today. Matt, that's Nick, and we got a lot to talk about today. So let's get straight into it. We're gonna
Well,
first hit recharge, I guess. Nick, do you want to lead us off there?
yeah, I'll lead us off tonight. So, big congratulations goes out to Chase Elliott. He's the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champion. He worked
Yep,
hard for it this season, and I know you're
definitely
you're
well
more the
deserved.
NASCAR fan than I am, but he definitely a well deserved win and a well
Yep,
deserved champion.
I would. No, I wouldn't add anything to that. Yep, I agree with you. I want to talk about something real quick here, and kind of if review the previous week was Toyota's comments on Tesla, and that is not Toyota, the car maker, Toyota, the I believe current president of Toyota. He said something interesting about Tesla that I think amounts to I might be butchering it, but that Tesla's got a great recipe, but they don't have a cook. They don't have a kitchen or a good cook, something along those lines.
From
Basically,
from what I read, it was Toyota was saying that Tesla does have a good recipe, but the things that they're lacking are a cook and a kitchen.
yeah, something like that. Essentially meaning, you know, they're not they got a good, I would say a good product or maybe some lineup of product, but they're not a real car company. And I don't necessarily think I agree with that. I think you know the I think the what was it the I don't know the market cap for Tesla compared is far. I think what they're the most valuable
They're the most
in the world.
valuable electric car manufacturer in the market right
and he,
now. At
and he made a good. Aren't they the most valuable quote unquote car company
I
though?
believe so,
Like
because I believe
period.
their market cap's at 400. Was it 400? Oh,
400 something billion or something like that. Million? I don't even know. I don't pay much attention to the worth of car companies, but I think it was interesting because he made good comments in that they possibly have a lot to learn with selling of full electric cars and even software because Tesla I think is like the Apple of cars where they have these really expensive polished products and lots of software updates and cool things but I don't think I could have been a car company because well they're the world's most valuable car manufacturer. So I'm not sure I get what he's meaning and that they haven't run gambit, but I would chalk it up to it's a changing environment. Even like something like a car company doesn't need to be the same thing that it always has been. You know,
right. Well,
so I don't necessarily agree with that. What he said.
and um, electric, the blog for electric vehicles and alternative transport in general.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I think I think they hit it well on the head as a kind of a sum up. Thanks Toyota, I didn't know that I had recipes in my driveway. I thought I had Teslas, but um, yeah, very
Yeah,
very interesting. Definitely, there,
it's worth checking out. I think there is merit said, but
there's
I
definitely merit, and
yeah
maybe at some point in the future, on a deep
we can
dive,
go more into stuff like
yeah,
that.
we'll talk about like the whole Toyota Tesla co-branded uh, factory. Well, not co-branded factory, but
Not co-branded, but
they
yeah.
sold the factory in exchange for shares of the company, and then they sold their shares for less profit than they would have now. And I think that's part of where this is coming from. But we can dive deeper into that
Yeah.
at a later
I just
date.
thought it was interesting where some they're bringing it up and I mean, I'll say it flat out. I don't agree with the comments. So, you know, I think that it's a changing landscape for everything, obviously, and I like the disruption of the market Tesla's doing. So no matter what you can say, good or bad about them, so I'm Team Tesla, I guess you could say.
And I personally see nothing wrong with competition in the market. I think it drives
Yeah,
innovation. So,
it's time to unseat some of the big guys that have been there for. That's always fun to
yeah.
see. All right. Well, with that, he's again, congratulations to Chase Elliott. Another congratulations though. Moving on into the chat here to Mercedes on their seventh consecutive constructors championship Hamilton with the race was it last week, 2 weeks ago at this
It
point.
was last week at Imola.
Last week? Oh, it was last. I'm thinking last race to next week's race is 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So last week's race, he won. I think it's all mathematically impossible for Mercedes not to win, right? So a very well deserved congratulations to them. I think maybe another thing to dive deeper into with maybe even pump the brakes on is Mercedes in general and just the technical prowess of their car, their team, their management. Just they are an incredible representation in F1. So you could even spend an entire you know session talking about them. But again, well deserved congratulations to them. And along the lines of Mercedes, I'm sure we've been seeing the discussions on the salary caps with F1, and also I'm seeing articles everywhere a potential Hamilton retirement. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a
So
big can of worms to maybe open.
well, and we've seen Hamilton becoming less of a race car driver or an F1 driver and more of a, I don't want to call it a political head, but he's obviously very supportive of his political beliefs out in the open while
Mm-hmm.
racing. He's kind of becoming a bit of an off-track fashion icon with his pink Burberry suit and
Yep.
his English bulldog.
Mm-hmm.
um, I believe it's an English bulldog. Correct me
Yep.
if I'm
I think
wrong,
so.
but
It's a
um,
bulldog of some kind.
yeah, I mean that whole it's been very interesting, and you know he's hit 93 wins. If Istanbul goes the way and the Turkish Grand Prix goes the way that every other race this season has honestly gone, um,
Every other race, period, pretty much.
yeah, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't finish the season at least 95 total wins and over. I believe at Imola he also passed 5,000 laps led. The only person that he
Mm-hmm.
has left to pass on that is also Michael Schumacher, um, at 5,190 somewhere in that range. So
Yep.
it would
It's
be
interesting. I see. I don't know. I would be. I don't want to see him retire. I can't. Along the lines of the salary negotiations, it is a legitimate. Even though there's grandfather rules in place, and for those who have contracts like Verstappen that go to 2023. I think he's got like what 25 million guaranteed in his contract through 23, and those things are being accounted for and kept in the negotiations. I mean, for all we know, it could be a negotiation tactic. I think he and Seb are the two top paid drivers in F1 right now, and arguably Seb isn't achieving the results that he should be for different topic to talk about. Maybe not today,
yeah.
but that said, I mean, in addition, it helps. I am at least at this point in favor of the salary caps to try to bring down the cost of F1. Gets maybe some new entrants in there. In addition, COVID's affected the entire world, and Mercedes in general as a company has taken a huge financial hit, and it's still like a lot of everybody, frankly, I think, recovering from that. So I don't know, but then again, you can't. In his defense, you can't also say that this would be a potential giant pay cut for him, And I don't know. It's I would hate to see him go, and as a general blanket statement, but I also would say that for many reasons, I don't think I'd be surprised given all of the chatter I'm seeing on the topic. So we'll have to see. I think as more things come out and there's more deep dives by people who are far smarter than we are in all things motor and F1 related. But it's I don't know. I think again blanket statement. I'd hate to see him go, but we'll see how things shape up. It's definitely first I heard about it, I was shocked. And the more I look into it, it's starting to make more logical sense, but still I think a surprise potentially. But we'll see how it shapes out, right?
Right, exactly. So,
Well, moving on down, let's see. Do you want to hit the? You want to hit talk about Yamaha first? You want to talk about Kevin Harvick next?
um, I think. Well, let's discuss Kevin Harvick. That
Okay.
the whole situation, and obviously, again,
Do you
you're
want me to
you're the bigger
paint the
NASCAR
picture?
fan, but I'll paint the general picture here.
Okay.
So Kevin Harvick is a obviously a NASCAR driver and a
Talented.
extremely talented, as shown by his 9 wins
Yep,
uh,
for
th-
this season.
this season. Yet,
And not
NAS
to mention, if I may interject, it's not only the nine. It's not only that he had was it nine for the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series, those 9 race wins. He's also, in addition to those, he's had 20 top 5 finishes. 20.
in this season alone.
Yes.
Okay,
So he's
so clearly he's a very talented driver. There is absolutely no reason for people to believe that they are not, in his team, that they are not a top 4 team.
mhm.
Yet NASCAR has decided to cut him from the championships.
He did not race for the championship in Phoenix because he when they raced at what I'm trying to find an article at Martinsville. I didn't,
Yeah, there was the incident in Martinsville, which
but after his performance there, they eliminated. He was eliminated from contention, despite all the overall success he's had this year, and arguably Chase Elliott, who won, was well deserved. I would also say that I think like a lot of other NASCAR drivers, or even just in general with the statistics, I mean, that's just insane, right? I mean,
well, to have that kind of career success and then to have that immediately shut down over, from what I'm gathering, is essentially in the world of NASCAR a minor incident. Um,
mhm. Yep.
you know, and I know I don't want to attribute this to the wrong person, but I believe it was Jeff Gordon
Hmm.
who was asked about this situation and basically said, we're past the days of a Dale Earnhardt Sr. win or a Richard Petty style just complete domination.
Yep.
However, to see someone who was so successful in the modern version of the sport to have that kind of pulled away is ridiculous, and I think that was echoed by a lot of current drivers, team
Yeah.
owners, and former drivers.
Hmm.
I mean,
I would
even
agree. I think
Mario
I'll read some
Andretti.
quotes here.
Uh,
Yeah, I'll read some quotes here if you don't mind. He said, Jeff
yeah,
Gordon quote, "Wow, I knew Martinsville Speedway would bring drama. Sorry, I think dramatic drama as a cutoff to the championship, but never anticipated what I just witnessed." Denny Hamlin, I think they deserve to be in. They've got 9 wins. There's not a person on the planet who would say they're not a top 4 team. They wanted a game 7 moment. My only issue is you can't ignore the first 8 innings. Martin Truex Jr., that's insane. Straight and to the point. Kurt Busch, I never fathomed that outcome. Never expected the 4 to have the trouble he had. It shows you how tough it really is. And maybe finally, Kenny Wallace. When NASCAR decided to change our sport, they made it so we can never compare to the past. I think it's so different in NASCAR now. Yeah, the days of how the old drivers, even Gordon to win, is gone. And I don't know. I don't agree. I think it was crazy. I think it was insane, and he definitely deserved to at least be in contention for, you know, the championship. But I guess it is what it is at this point, right?
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of interesting calls this year, with Formula Electric not going back to in person, with I mean everything that was surrounding NASCAR to begin with coming back to having spectators in the stands. We've seen interesting decisions out of F1, F2, and F3 this year. Um, it,
Yep.
it, of all of those, this one is the one that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yep.
But
But it makes sense to them. So,
yeah,
well, I mean,
uh,
maybe along those same threads doesn't really make sense to me, but makes sense to them in a way. And I think is the MotoGP Yamaha engines issue, and if I'll tee that up for us here. Essentially, it seems like for those who don't know, Yamaha motorcycle racing, Yamaha is one of the players, and there was a fault in their engine with their what was
it
it?
was the valves.
The, the other valves, and those. not being supplied by Yamaha, I think, failed or were deemed dangerous or something. And
Yamaha deemed them Jesus, deemed them to be unsafe. However, it was more of a performance gain issue with the valves were burning up,
hmm
and
but Chief Amon wish they weren't supplied by Yamaha. They're by a secondary supplier. And
correct. And
from what
from what I've read, they were initially supposed to use supplier A. They were testing supplier B. They built the first round of engines with supplier B, but then came back and began building
yep,
um,
they were replacing
engines.
without permission essentially. And I think they were going. I think they were. It sounded like from what I was reading that they were through the process to legally change to supplier A from the failing B, and then they just didn't, and then they changed the stuff. Period.
It
And
seemed
one
like
could
they were trying
argue,
to do it quietly,
yeah,
but then
exactly, and one could argue that even if it makes your engine safer or how even it was supposed to be, at the start of the season, I mean, I'll make the argument that that's in any way that's cheating. I mean, like you're altering your engine mid-season. I mean, that's
well,
that's cheating.
and burning valves is not a safety issue. It's
Yeah.
a great way to get a lot of DNFs in a season,
Uh-huh.
but it's not. If it was an exploding valve or it was blowing chunks
That's
of
one thing,
carbon
but
and
it wasn't.
aluminum, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, it was
And
not.
in stark contrast to NASCAR's decision, maybe, I don't agree with that. I agree with, I don't know the governing body of MotoGP, but I agree with the decision essentially drivers were not penalized, but Yamaha as a manufacturer and teams that run their engines were dealt with penalty points. I think Yamaha was given a total of 50 penalty or reduction of 50 points. And they weren't given penalty, they were had points taken away from them. So I agree with the steps that were taken. One interesting take, if the drivers should have been had points taken away from them because, right? And
Well,
honestly, I don't have an opinion on it because one argument was they were not to belay any question. Points were not taken away from drivers, and the argument is, well, this isn't their fault. They aren't responsible for the quality of the engines on which the motorcycles they're riding. Right? It's the team and the team for which they drive. That's their responsibility. So why should they have points taken away from them? Right? But the argument comes in where, let's say we come to the end of the season and these drivers are barely ahead of other drivers who don't have these engines. The argument we made, they should have had points taken away from them because of this issue, and thus that might change who was the top, champion driver or drivers season, right? But the other side of that coin is, what if points were, or if they keep changing things, are taken away from drivers because of this supplier issue from Yamaha? What if that costs a fantastic driver by just a small number of points at the end of the season? And then you could argue, well, they didn't, it's not their fault, so they lost out on the season after a fantastic performance for something that wasn't their fault. And I don't really have an opinion either way when it comes to the drivers. I Yeah, I agree with the decision made from the manufacturer, and even so much for a team end, because they're responsible for, again, in my opinion, what goes into that's part of their equipment, right? Like any other professional sports team or anything else.
yeah, and the governing body's the FIM, very much like the FIA with Formula One. But I think in their discussion, I mean, they put in a notice to the FIM
Mm-hmm.
about them taking these changes into effect, calling it a safety thing. But in the process, they ratted themselves out,
Yep.
and created the controversy there, which they're claiming there was no performance gain. However, other drivers on the field and
What else would
even,
you do?
well, what else would you do? And also, the rules came down to, as long as there was no performance gain, and that the big thing was the seals on those motors. They have to be sealed when put into a bike, and remain sealed for the duration of the race to show that nobody's changing parts out. And the seals on the updated motors were never broken. Other teams, other constructors, I believe Honda and Ducati, both raised the idea that, well, the seals have to be broken if they're changing this. And technically, the motors were illegal, but they were never modified. So
it's a lot of gray area.
There's a lot of gray area there.
I still agree with the ultimate decision, though. I mean,
I agree with the ultimate decision. I definitely don't think it should be down to the drivers or the riders at this point, because while a rider should know what's going on with his bike, at the same time,
one could argue that's ultimately
how if Yamaha wasn't telling their teams that they made the change, which it seems like they weren't, they just were handed new motors and power units. How is anybody supposed to know that there was a change made when all of a sudden your bike has the performance of a 1200cc motor? You know.
Yep. It's interesting, and I said something that we're trying to, I guess, branch out and make note of things outside Formula One and other places. So definitely interesting. But maybe we return, maybe we pump the brakes a little bit here now and return back to something a little bit more on brand for us, or maybe something we reference in episodes, and that being well, not F1, I guess, but Porsche.
Yeah, Porsche. So we wanted to take this episode to kind of dive into Porsche. We discussed it in the last episode, actually getting deeper into Matt and I's background with Porsche
and why we have the bias. And I would be admit that didn't think it might even have been the reference that didn't think it would come so soon, but something happened. Something was maybe something was released that kind of forced our hand, and by Porsche, and rather not a something was released, but a two somethings was released.
A duet.
A duet
in their own terminology, and in my personal opinion, one of the most beautiful duets to ever grace my eyes. And that
I was telling Nick before this that the only word that I could think for the marketing of the product from both organizations, the only word that comes to my mind is, quite frankly, perfect.
and to stop the inevitable comments that just get to the point, we're discussing Porsche's duet with Embraer private jets, business jets. Porsche being my ultimate car love.
Well, both.
But in addition to that, Embraer being probably the pinnacle and the most popular business jet. And for those of you who don't know, I am both an aviation nerd and a car nerd. And to see these two come together in such beautiful harmony as they have with this duet,
it's perfect.
It made my week, quite honestly. In seeing the release on, was it Wednesday or Thursday? For those, again, who don't know, we're based here in the United States. With the turbulent week that we've had, that we will not touch politically.
Yes. To say the least. It's nice to have something to lift your spirits a little.
It was a very calming day when Porsche released the pictures and Embraer released their initial video of their duet. And I keep calling it a duet because that is what the terminology they're using. It's a business partnership. It's a limited run of both the Embraer, I believe it's the I'll get the exact models here. It's definitely a Porsche 911 Turbo S in a custom livery with custom. I mean, custom down to the bolts.
9 are already. If you guys if you'd like one, reach out to Porsche or Embraer. I think it's a cool 10 million for the package deal.
It was somewhere in that range, yes.
To echo Nick, I'd say that Myself as well. Porsche is the pinnacle of my car look, and as car nerd and butting aviation nerd. As Nick mentioned last podcast, for me it's primarily been things on water, and I've always loved the sky. But those are quickly shifting to more of an aviation nerd than anything.
Yes. Now,
I
I just want to make note. On top of the 911 Turbo S, and this is a 992 911 Turbo S.
Yeah.
So the true pinnacle of where Porsche has been in their full production line. This is also a partnership with a matching liveried Embraer. It is the Phenom 300E. Now, for those of you who don't know, and Matt, if you don't mind me educating, the Phenom 300E is the fastest and most commercially available, I will say, business jet that can be flown by a single pilot. So it is
what
single
you're saying
pilot
is it's
rated.
quite literally a perfect match for Porsche, being I would say one of the most popular and I wouldn't maybe not the fastest, but or maybe the fastest, most widely commercially available. Because what's faster than the 992
So
supercars and
the
stuff like that? But they're not widely available.
yeah,
Not like you can go to a dealership and write a check.
quite honestly, the 911 Turbo S is, I would say, it's the fastest vehicle that you could just go to a dealership and buy. That's
Yeah,
on the road today. And I'm not talking strictly 0 to 60 times. I'm talking overall.
package.
Oh yeah, overall package. It is the pinnacle
Yeah,
of where um everybody has been trying to reach for a while.
needless
It's
to say, we love the 99.
well, and we'll dive into this in a moment, but I've personally driven a 992, not the Turbo S, but a 992, just a standard
I
Carrera
have not.
4 or I'm sorry, the Carrera S, not the 4, on a closed racetrack at high speeds, and I can tell you from personal experience that it is an amazing feat of engineering, and they've done brilliant things with that car over time.
Yep.
However,
Maybe we get into our personal stories of why Porsche.
well, let's talk about Porsche in general first, and then we'll capstone it with
With that, you want to
with
capstone with that?
I would
Or not
capstone.
set the scene.
No, I say let's capstone with the stories. My
Alright.
my personal take would be, let's discuss the news about Porsche, and then discuss why we're just so
Hmm. Okay.
obsessed.
Well, I will. Then I want to hit something that I think along the lines of the 911, something that is very well received by you and I. In an interview with I forgot his name, but Porsche high up, I think recently it was talked about that the Porsche 911 will not be going all electric for quite a while, and I am very happy
Yes, thank
about that.
goodness.
Not that that wouldn't be a good thing in some ways, and there are several hybrid hypercars. There is even some all electric hypercars, supercars, and F1. I mean, it would I think there's definitely a time and a place for that to happen. I just don't want it to happen yet.
Not
And
to the
I'm happy to hear it.
911.
Not to the 911.
Eh,
Leave the 911 alone. There's enough change going on in the world.
well, exactly, and take a look at the Taycan. I mean,
Yeah,
clearly,
exactly. I mean,
the
they
Taycan
got
and the
enough to
Taycan
whet the appetite.
Turbo.
Yeah,
Quite honestly, eh,
they even have what? They have a hybrid.
well, the 919
Yeah, they've
in and
got
of
enough
itself.
basically, especially in that they have a fully electric car. I I mean, I would say that there's even a hybrid 911. There would I mean definitely be performance gains there, right? At some cost,
Yeah, but
primarily what's a weight. but that would kind of negate one of the things that's known for with its cornering ability. I mean, and just overall.
Well, and the nice thing that you can do with an electric powertrain or even a hybrid powertrain, as we've seen with the Taycan and even the Cayenne, or more specifically, another car that I have real life experience with is the extremely long named Panamera, which is
yeah, you want to. I'll give you the next 5 minutes to recite the name.
Yeah, so I actually have to pull it off the Hot Wheels that I have of it off the wall so that I can get this correct. It is the Porsche Panamera Turbo SE Hybrid Sport Turismo. Which,
feel free to take a breather after that one.
Yeah, it is it's a name. It's a very long name. But it's a well-earned name because each one of those things really does stand out in that vehicle. I did not drive that specific Panamera. However, I was driven in that specific Panamera, taking corners at Road America at above 100 miles an hour while the driver, a former Le Mans driver for Porsche, was pointing out places where he's seen accidents happen before as we were taking turns at over 100 miles an hour.
Like it was nothing, right?
Like it was nothing. And a huge piece of that is the low center of gravity that the Panamera has in that hybrid powertrain.
Well, I think you were telling me too that the hybrid powertrain and just the way that the different systems are married together, and the Panamera is a big, heavy car to begin with, right? It's an executive car, I would argue, and I see a lot of them around, carrying families around or businessmen. But the fact that the way that they were able to marry those two systems together, you're telling me, was incredibly, and how nimble it was for what it was.
Well, even just the Panamera GTS that I did get to drive was the only time it really felt heavy was after immediately driving the 911, the 992 911 to getting in the Panamera. Just the overall braking, the car definitely felt heavier. For those of you who want to take a look, I'm specifically talking about when we were coming through the back straight on Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. Coming up to Canada Corner. We had a professional driver in front of us in a 992 911, and we were in the 992 911S and the Panamera GTS. So initially we got in, and I did this with my brother, who I mentioned on the last podcast, and shout out to him for actually promoting the podcast for us on YouTube, which was extremely kind of him, and I appreciate that.
Ditto over here.
Him and I went, and he does have a video on his channel specifically about that Porsche experience and that day that we spent at Road America. But we got to drive the Panamera and the 911 back to back, and that 911 felt, and just being an S model, just felt really planted, really solid, and really safe above 100 miles an hour. I've never really felt safe in a car above 100 miles an hour before.
That'll be a theme for me as well, I think, later on.
But this definitely felt that way. The Panamera GTS felt heavy coming into that last braking zone, that last heavy braking zone, and we had to take the car from above 140 miles an hour to, roughly 45 to 50 to come around that real sharp turn at Canada Corner. The car that handled that turn the best, I would say, was the hybrid Sport Turismo, the Panamera with the very, very long name. And part of that, I'm sure, is because a qualified Porsche driver who has been driving race cars his entire life was driving the car with us in it.
Maybe just a little bit.
But I also, the weight distribution in that car, minus the 4 adults, really was. I feel it's
Well,
got
well
slight.
thought out.
It's over engineered to the best possible degree.
Hmm. I mean, and to that point, I mean, yeah, like there would be definite benefits to it in a 911. I think we'd both agree, not yet. Don't
Not
mess with it just yet.
not yet. If you if you want an all electric 911,
Taycan
it well
S.
the
It's the closest you're gonna get.
the Taycan Turbo would be probably the closest you're gonna get. It's not going to be a 911,
Oh, 100%.
but it's going to be a badass car in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And
And the fact that it can, kill. I mean, as we just talked about Tesla too, and with the Taycan, I've liked the Taycan since it came out. Taycan, Taycan. I'm not sure how you pronounce that final A,
Taken
but
or
I'm
Taycan is
Taycan.
typically
Whatever, the badass all electric sedan from Tesla, or not. Sorry, not Tesla. Wow, see Porsche. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's say that Teslas, their performance models and their ludicrous mode and all like that's just like they're cool, and I love watching, Tesla's videos on YouTube and in real life sometimes just like just smoking cars with the performance mode, the performance models, all the torque from the electric powertrain. I mean, it's just great to watch, right? However, I was watching a video, reading an article like last week where and seeing the Taycan smoke the current Tesla performance model, which given my affinity for Porsche, I was very happy. And then, Tesla came out with a software update or however they do it called, what was it, the Cheetah mode or something like that, and it sounded like it provided some extra horsepower and speed, past 80 miles an hour. It also lowered the front suspension and changed the dampers to basically give it the best, most stable platform for off the line for the model. And I was reading and watching the video, like whether it was from a complete dead stop or a rolling start, the it was helped it be better matched to the Taycan, but in the end, the Taycan still overtook the Tesla, which has kind of been the king of, in my opinion, of drag races recently. So it's
well,
not
and the Taycan is selling
dethroned.
so much
It's
better.
selling like hotcakes.
It,
I mean, yeah, it's insanely expensive, but it's also Porsche, where when you buy a Porsche, you get an engine and four wheels, and maybe if you're lucky, you get driver's seat and four doors, and everything else is optional. So
well, well,
I'm
I
surprised they
think
even paint the car.
well, and quite honestly, even the Taycan, in comparison to other, to get the performance that the Taycan has in a another vehicle that could match that, you would have to jump up to the hyper electric car level, which doesn't fully exist yet.
Yeah, unless you're talking about like what the Rimac, and that isn't,
Rimac would be
and then you're not getting. I mean, that's electric hypercar. That's the that's above, I think, performance levels of the Taycan. But the closest thing to the Taycan that
it's
is
the
the
closest
Taycan,
performance wise, and quite honestly,
and you
there's
can't get that. I mean, for a myriad of reasons, assuming you're not Richard Hammond, you don't drive it off the side of a cliff. So,
yes, um, and what the next thing closest, I guess, in the market would be something like the 918 Spider.
yeah, but if you're talking about electric, I mean, and I think that's where we need to stay.
Well,
Again, we're being happy about yeah. If you're talking about other like hybrid powertrains, yes, but if you're talking about a low electric
a,
powertrain, a
a
true
fully
comparison,
electric powertrain that's not only a daily driver but a monster machine as far as it comes to performance. Your two
the closest
options
thing is the
are,
Tesla Performance.
yeah, you either
Tesla
have
100 or whatever.
you have the Model S Performance, or you have the Taycan and Taycan Turbo. And quite honestly,
Yeah.
if you're going to be buying a Taycan, why would you buy anything but the Turbo?
if you can't afford it. Isn't it north of 175 grand or something like that?
Let me pull the
Which
numbers real quick.
at that point, so here's an interesting query. You pull up the numbers. I'm pretty sure that top end Taycan Turbo S or Taycan Turbo, I don't know if there's an S on it or not, but would you go top end Taycan Turbo or probably not yet top end 911, but middle of the road towards top end for sure 911 for the same money? Which would you choose? You know,
Purely just to have in the garage right now, or are we talking?
Nick, you there?
Yeah. Oh,
Seems that Nick's. So I'm not sure if he's here still with us. Oh, seems like he just popped back in. Nick, are you with us again?
well, sorry about that, folks. Apparently, my microphone decided to disconnect from all of my platforms at the same time. We're still new to the podcasting game,
Technology's
so
great.
um, no. So we were talking about specifically the, you know, where would
Taycan.
we sit as far as a which one would you get, top end 911 or a top end Taycan?
Well, no, not specifically. I think we were talking about a Taycan could, or not Taycan, a 911 could kind of top out anywhere, no matter all the options and different paint and whatever else you could do. But that's what I'm guessing or I'm guesstimating is, a top end Taycan turbo is what, like 175, or Taycan Turbo S, whatever the heck it's called, right?
The Taycan
Versus,
Turbo S begins at $179,000 US.
oh, it begins. So never
Yes.
mind. So probably north, around 200. And
The
for that
Turbo
money,
begins at 150, and then the standard 4S begins at 109. Again, that's
oh,
US.
for the same money, it's obviously a lot of money, right? Which one would you rather have, though? I'll pose
Now,
that to you.
for me personally, as someone who enjoys going on longer drives, while the Taycan's very much capable of it, um, right now I would take a 911 over the Taycan, but
Okay.
give it a couple years and that might change.
I rather not surprisingly am in the same opinion as Nick knows, and for the listeners, I think even for both of us, driving has always been, for me, not a point A to point B, four wheels and an engine kind of thing. I relax while driving, as long as I'm not in, say, bumper to bumper rush hour traffic 24/7.
Sure.
And for the same reasons, if I want to go to a long drive, not that they both couldn't go to the track on the off weekend, but thinking about the places that I usually drive, or even regularly or once in a while, long distance, I'd have to agree. And just pure, petrol head, current day, oil, what like Jeremy Clarkson, he likes, I think, other, Top Gear episodes. He likes, his car is not, doesn't like electric, right? He wants to be, churning through like a dead baby dinosaur, or something, like something along those lines.
I mean,
I
it
kind of
doesn't
like
shock
that.
me
I
that
kind of
the
like that mantra, But like, I think you made an interesting point. Give it a few years. Given the next generation of the, or next edition, next redesign of, see what they change, in the Taycan, and an expanded market, battery technology. I very well think that would change too. It's close, but I'm still leaning 911 for the
well,
same money.
and for me it would be the same way, and I think that in and of itself is the perfect segue into talking about our histories, and me understand, and me talking about my history with Porsche will kind of lead you to understand where I'm coming from when I say that I would take a 911 over a Taycan right now. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of nostalgia that I have with the 911.
Well, then why don't I hit mine because you mentioned kind of you know hones into why I have the respect for Porsche, and then I'll segue into yours. How about that?
That works for me.
Well, then along those lines, you had made mention the talking about when you were at Road America and doing the testing or you got the experience to the Porsche experience, right? To drive multiple models, and you've never felt safer. And was it a nine? I said a 911, above 100,
Well, both
correct?
the 911 and the Panamera
Or
GTS.
maybe that'd be just Porsche in general, right?
Well, yeah, their entire lineup. We were at high speed in,
The entire lineup, give or
well,
take.
not so
Well,
much
yeah,
the
you guys
Cayenne.
did a.
The Cayenne and Macan were street speeds.
Oh, that's right. You guys had a street Porsche.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
actually went out and drove the old Road America course, and I'll discuss this more. And obviously, you can also go watch Zach's
Well,
video on the Shooting
to that
Cars
point, along
YouTube
those
channel.
lines, that is kind of the foundation of my love. I think I would say what was about. We were actually talking about this beforehand. I was about 8 years old when I, was first, let's say, introduced to Porsche. With I had traveled out to California to visit my aunt and uncle. From what I could have been out there previously, but at that point, I would have been too young to remember. This is the first time I actually remembered going out there to California and San Diego, and I remember I didn't realize at the time car guy, less so than myself and you, Nick, but you know about him. He had an old M3. I forget what year, what model. I didn't pay much attention to BMW at that point, but he had a pre 2008 986 Porsche Boxer convertible. And what did we actually discover? What was that gray?
Was the
Seal gray metallic
Seal
or
Gray
something?
Metallic? Yep.
So for the along the reason one of the reasons why Nick and I love the 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 duet between Embraer and Porsche is the livery of the car, and then the jet is blue and gray. It seems like I'm always chasing after a certain color of gray, and that pretty much is the seal gray metallic from that Porsche, that pre 2008. I'm gonna guess I don't know the proper year, but pre 2008 986. It was a convertible. I never saw it with the top up, but frankly, it looked better with the top down from pictures I've seen growing as I got older. And I'll never forget that as like an 8-year old, car bedroom or bedroom like car pictures. I had what I think my it was a Ferrari and a Corvette at the time. For the attainable and the dream car and the attainable, right? Porsches didn't really register on my radar that yet. And to be honest, they didn't look, you know, like I think, an 8-year old's bedroom wall car, And arguably you could make they look they have handsome styling, I always have, but not flashy, that would draw your eyes for an 8-year-old. So I don't know much about them. And I'll never forget going down, it wasn't the PCH, the Pacific, Coast Highway for those who aren't in the US. I'll never forget going down a normal, California highway and street roads, and how stable the car was, even at 8 years old. Riding in, two-seater, right? Riding in the front seat, you're not really supposed to be that young, but we did anyway. And whether it was going down street roads and clearly a performance capable sports car, or going over 120 down this highway with the top open, it wasn't the looks that got me. Like I think a lot of brands. It was the experience. The fact that, like you experienced, Nick, going around in general Porsches during that day, and kind of in your background as well. It's the engineering, it's the stability, it's the completeness of the package, the over engineering of the car, and just how safe and normal it felt. It felt normal to be going 120 miles an hour down the highway. and better than I felt going 45 in, like, let's say, a Chevy Malibu. And that just blew my mind. The sound of the engine, everything just sounded and felt right. So when I'm talking about Porsche, not only do I think that they look great, you know, my favorite being the 918 or even the 992, 911, they're beautiful. But even besides that, is just the engineering and the attention to detail and the fact that to me they have been and always the benchmark to which other auto brands or model cars and drum whatever is are compared to. You know, I've never felt like I did riding and then later in my life driving the same Porsche than I have in anything else. So that still stayed today. You know.
Absolutely. And so my Porsche background goes much deeper than that. Um, my love for Porsche and the brand and the crest and the engineering behind it has been long manufactured in my head since before I was born. Um, and I believe possibly at the time I was born, maybe before then.
I don't even think I know this.
Um, my uncle, very very similar to your story, which doesn't
Seems to be a
shock me.
theme, huh?
Yeah, being that we've joked in the past, ever since we met each other in college, that we're the same person in different skin.
And our
Um,
families are incredible. It's honestly scary how similar our
yeah,
families are.
it it's it's very interesting. My uncle had a 993 911, and I believe he got rid of that either the year of or the year after I was born.
Okay.
Um, but there, just to kind of show you, there was kind of a German car streak because he also had I believe it was an E36 M3 or might have been an E30
Well, that's
BMW
scary
M3.
because while I don't know what specifics on my uncle's, he has that similar.
Yeah.
That's little too uncanny.
Yes, and for those listening, Matt does not know the story. We did not talk about this
No,
beforehand.
I swear we
So
don't.
this
This,
is
I
Matt's
might know a
genuine
lot about
reaction
it
to
and
my
vice
story.
versa. This is something I full heartedly admit that I don't know.
Yeah, I believe his M3 was a convertible. No, you know what?
I'll
I don't know if he had an M3. He might have had just the top of the line 3 series. But he had a convertible 3 series and that
we'll find
light
out later.
and that like light I
Close
think it's
enough.
Laguna Seca blue. But he had the 911. Come 1999, 2000, I believe, possibly 2001, uh, I was right around 5 years old. We had a PlayStation 1 gray brick, and I had the game Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed. Had the bright
Oh boy.
silver metallic Boxster on the cover, flying off
Yeah.
the street top in San Francisco, nonetheless. Um, and I remember playing that game and playing Need for Speed. I believe it was High Stakes that also had a silver 911 uh, 993 on the cover. And generally loving the Porsches and kind of getting to know the crest. Then my tastes made a horrible turn when I turned 7 years old, and I'm not really sure why. And I decided that I wanted a Volkswagen Beetle for a little while. So still within the same manufacturer family, although I'm not sure. I'm actually
What
not
year?
sure of, and I should know this, but I'm not sure when Porsche became a part of the Volkswagen family. But either way, like I had a weird obsession with bugs. I had a weird obsession with Ford Focuses for a little while. Uh, and then we met, my family met a guy that moved to town. He was a young, uh, president of a bank that had started up. It was a hometown bank, small time, 2 branches, one in our hometown, another in their main branch a couple miles away in a separate town. But a very interesting guy. His name was Brian Schultz, and he kind of became my role model. I would say idol, but he was also like weirdly like a big brother and a best friend to me. Got me into my love of Notre Dame football, which is not nearly as strong as the reinstilled love of Porsche that he gave me. Because it was during the Summer Olympics. I can't remember where. It was football season. I was getting ready to go into 4th grade, I believe. I was in 3rd grade, going into 4th grade. And football practice came to an end. I remember I was playing for the Saints in our junior football league, and we were awful. And I turn around, and it went minivan, 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 random midnight blue 996 Carrera, minivan, 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 truck, minivan, whatever. And I just remember everybody turning around and looking and going, who's here in the Porsche? And like, who's got the fancy blue sports car? And
You knew who?
I knew who, because I had only seen the car once before, and it was parked in front of my house when Brian had come over for dinner. And Brian loved to come over for dinner, especially during the Summer Olympics, because he did not own a TV himself, but he really did love to watch beach volleyball, women's beach volleyball to be exact. So I remember walking over and wondering why Brian was picking me up, and it was, well, he was in the area, and my parents had said, hey, Nick's at football practice, and, you know, he is going to need a ride home, or we need to go get him. And Brian's like, oh, no, I'll go pick him up. And I remember walking to the front of the car and putting my pads, my, like, sweaty pads, in the front trunk of his 996 Carrera, hopping in the passenger seat of it was the darker tan interior, leather, and it was a 6-speed. And I remember him just peeling out of that parking lot and driving me home through like the only slight, and when I say hilly, I'm not talking about like a Tail of the Dragon hills or mountain road. I'm talking like little dips and valleys. It was.
I think I know the place you're talking about over there.
Yeah, it's in Illinois. There's not a ton of hills and dips and valleys, but we're coming down the road and we're coming back up, and I just remember saying like, you know, oh, one day I want to learn how to drive stick. And I looked over at him, and obviously he was driving stick, and he goes, it's not that hard, and maybe one day I'll let you drive this. And my eyes lit up. And I remember we pulled up in front of the house. I got all my stuff out. We had dinner. He watched beach volleyball. He almost spilled chili in my mom's new car. And then we decided to go out for a little spin in the Porsche because I was obsessed with it. And it was a brand new Porsche. And we go out, we sit down, and he just immediately peels off and starts doing donuts in our cul-de-sac. And I'm in the back seat with my legs all crunched up. My brother's in the back seat with his legs all crunched up. And my mom's in the passenger seat. My dad's still working at the time. And he is literally just donuts in our cul-de-sac. Awesome. And my mom has the death grip. I can't remember if it was on his leg or his shoulder. And she's screaming, Brian, our neighbors are going to kill us. They've seen headlights come through their living room 15 times. And he just goes, no, it's fine. Everybody loves when Porsches do donuts. And, you know, silly things. He was 27 or 28 at the time. He was a young guy, very wealthy, very well off in life, and very, very smart. Very smart. He was a rocket scientist for Boeing for part of his life.
Oh, so he's just a little bit intelligent.
Extremely, extremely intelligent person. And he was a good soul. And unfortunately, what happened to him is he was killed by a drunk driver on New Year's Eve,
Mm,
or New Year's Day of 2005, um,
dang.
and uh, uh, somewhere out there that 996 still exists. I think his friend managed to take it after his passing. But I will always remember in that 996, we were going fishing one day, and I don't know why, or, no, we had my mom's car, but Brian was driving it. And I remember we got stuck with traffic in a lane that wasn't a turn lane. And when the green arrow came on, mind you, my mother's car at the time was a 2004 Chrysler Pacifica base model. Um, Elegant car for Chrysler, being that it was technically a Mercedes, but well, in every sense of the word, it was Mercedes. Really, the only thing that was actually developed by Chrysler was the clock and the dash.
I was just gonna say
Um,
the dash clock, wasn't it?
yeah, exactly. It was every sense of the term, it was a Mercedes. Um, and I just remember him punching the throttle, turning that corner, and my mom again looking over at him and going, "Brian, what is wrong with you?" And he goes, "Well, every lane's a turn lane in a Porsche. You just have to be fast enough." And all of this, I mean, I watched him. We would walk back and forth through downtown. He lived just outside of the downtown area where I grew up. And I remember I threw him a football and he was backpedaling and he saw out of the corner of his eye that he was about to basically fall over the hood of his Porsche. And he literally jumped the hood to catch the football. And it just, over and over in my mind, I can only ever think about that midnight blue 996 and how great it sounded, how much it reminds me of Brian. And I have a model of it sitting on my shelf, literally within centimeters of where I can reach right now. So I actually have two of them. One of them's one of those little. You remember those old toy cars that you push the button and it would sound like it's starting up, and then you push another button and it would drive forward? I've got one of those, and then sitting next to it is an actual Porsche model from the dealership. Not
Nice.
It's a Porsche design model of the car. Same color, same rims, same interior. The only thing is the one that I have is the turbo. I don't have the standard Carrera. But
I would say for the same one of my uncle's, I went through a phase where I don't have like the clutter. I went through a literature phase. I would go into this my specific connection to Porsche with my uncle's car. I have unopened or rather sealed literature from the Porsche dealership in California that I will never open until I frankly I don't think I'll ever open. So much like you have the die casts and the model, I have the literature safely tucked away. Never. I had two copies, one that I opened and one that I didn't, to make sure one stays pristine. So I feel almost I'm jealous.
so, well,
You've got such a familial connection to the man and the car,
oh, it
and
goes deeper,
it
man.
was around often. Though it was like I'm over here hearing this story, everybody, and thinking, well, I wish I could have. I wish I was that close. My connection to Porsche, I had to fly to California to go see, so I didn't get to see it that often. Like maybe once a year.
Well, and then so it gets even deeper than that.
Oh boy. Well, let's
so
go.
so
Let's keep pumping the brakes.
After Brian was killed, and I never saw that blue 996 ever again. A couple,
Which I'd say, if we could take a quick sec here, ladies and gentlemen, please do not. I've it.
yeah,
You never know what's going to happen, and even the smallest amount of alcohol is too much. So make sure
yeah,
if you do go out, do it
don't
responsibly, please.
don't drink and drive. I can't explain enough.
Just a little is already too much. Don't
Yeah,
think that you can do it. Worst case, have someone. There's no shame in having drive you home and come in to pick up your automobile the next morning.
and also a note for me personally, because to tell the Brian story briefly, and the story's been told many times over. in the years since his passing, but really, um, also take into consideration when you drink and drive, it's not just affecting you and
Hmm.
whoever you might hit.
Yep.
Brian had been drinking that night and decided to take a cab and did the right thing. But him and the cab driver were both, um, both unfortunately lost their lives in that accident um, by someone who was just absolutely annihilated.
Hmm.
However, like you said, the smallest amount of alcohol really can make the difference.
It's already too much.
Yeah, so keeping in that storyline,
Hmm.
I remember not too long after Brian's passing, there was a video game that came out, and video games were a large part of my teenage years.
Hmm.
Um, but another thing that I will make note is I am a huge, as well as Matt, James Bond fan. And the unfortunate passing of Sean Connery this week was another damper
Yeah.
on my week. However, one of one of the games that came out, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name. Um, it was a completely fictionalized James Bond video game that starred Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. Um, but the main car in the game was a maroon Porsche Cayenne.
Was that game Nightfire?
It was not Nightfire.
I
It
I know
was
I know the car in the game. You're
it
oh
it I can tell you exactly who the Bond girl was in the game, and I can tell you exactly which model Cayenne was in the game.
oh it's
Because I
oh
believe the
Everything or Nothing.
it could have been. Quite honestly, I know that one of the final levels ended up taking place in either Louisiana or Florida, and there was a long chase sequence on a motorcycle with guns.
I just
But
pulled it up online, and I think it looks like a Porsche Cayenne maroon Porsche Cayenne Turbo,
yeah,
and
yep,
this is the title of the article is James Bond 007 Everything or Nothing review.
yeah,
It's
and
gotta be that game.
it has to be, because I remember specifically that
I
maroon
remember
Cayenne,
playing this game
I
too.
I and me thinking how cool it was that Bond was driving a Porsche,
Hmm.
because normally he always drives Aston Martins, or in the time that I was alive at the time and the movies were coming out, he was driving BMWs. Um,
I'll say
but
yeah, I would agree along the lines that cool to see something unique with Bond because, like I said, he's known for what Omega watches always quote unquote. But if you actually do a little bit of research, not always. There was in terms of the watches, a little bit of
the,
BMW, Porsche here and there in terms of the cars.
well,
Not always
and
accurate.
specifically in the video games, it seemed that Porsche made this big stance, and obviously, I can't imagine the amount of money that Porsche paid to have the Cayenne Turbo be front and center in that. However,
Well, especially back then because they weren't
well,
always the myth.
no, Porsche put a lot of forward momentum behind the Cayenne release, because I
Mm-hmm.
remember the video game came out before the Cayenne was even for sale. I believe it was part of the debut was that it was in this James Bond video game that
I think
played
you're
like a
right.
movie. And I remember trying to figure out, I was trying to get models of the car, because I always collected models of the things and trinkets and things of the
The stuff you
cars
like.
and
Yeah.
yeah, the cars and planes that I've been passionate about. I've got, you know, the MD-11 models and Porsche models galore. Anything that I've ever.
I always like finding they're probably all lost for me a little bit similar to you, Nick. Is that I didn't so much like I tried to find the ones that I could build. They're probably all broken or right now. I never took very good care of them, but along the same lines, I tried to build them because I just like putting them on display in my room on my shelves when I was a kid.
Well, yeah, and it was kind of like my version of a vision board.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but so I remember playing that game and driving. I don't know why I remember this, but Serena Saint Germain through the streets of I believe it was Peru, in the game. And I just remember how cool it was that Bond was driving a Porsche, and then I also remember getting heat from my friends because they're like, he's driving a mom car. And I'm like, SUVs aren't mom cars. They're cool because you can hide more gadgets in them. And I vehemently defended Bond using the Cayenne in that game from my friends who were at the time obsessed with the Lamborghinis. The Murcielago was just in the at the time the Reventon was just a concept that was coming out, and the Sesto Elemento as far as the change from the Gallardo to the Huracan. In that time frame, and I remember slightly being obsessed with the Reventon because the release of it was next to the F-22 Raptor.
Don't even get me started.
Oh, I know that's another topic for yet another time, but I always kept coming back to that Porsche, and then I ended up just falling in love with the Cayenne. And I think most of that was because Bond had driven it in a video game. But I fell in love, and I followed the Cayenne through all of its iterations.
Are you starting to poke at me with that?
No, not yet. We'll get to that point.
I think he's trying to poke at me with something specific on the
we'll discuss that towards the end of my Porsche story as it sits right now. But so in junior high, I know I ended up drawing the entire Porsche lineup, which was the Cayenne, the Carrera, the
Panamera.
There was no Panamera yet. It was
Not
the
even
Cayman,
the
the
first
Cayman and the
ugly
Boxster.
version?
Yeah, not even the first ugly version. I want to say that was 2008 is when I signed that, because I have that photo hanging, or not that photo, that drawing that I did hanging in my bedroom. And I signed it on today in 2008.
Oh, nice.
I signed it 11/8/2008. So funny enough,
like 12 years ago to the day.
12 years ago to the day, I drew the entire Porsche lineup from scratch, and it took me forever. I think I might have traced the horse in the center of the crest, but other than that, everything else I remember doing specifically by hand. So I had, obviously going back to then, I have that. I've got other little Porsche things. Again, obsessed with the Cayenne. Then the Panamera came out, and I hated it. I think everybody really hated the looks of the original Panamera. In fact, it was, I'll call it lovingly called the pancake amongst me and my friends, because it was hideous and it looked like someone had taken a 911 and flattened it and stretched it out.
Yep.
And it was.
I thought it was like someone taking a Cayenne and a 911 and making like the worst parts of each of the models and then combining them together.
Yeah, the design on it was awful. It really was. Now, that being said, that I still followed Porsche through that. From about 2012 to, I would say right up until about 2017, I became very obsessed with the Japanese domestic market. My quote-unquote attainable dream car became the GTR, like most people's did when that car came out.
I can happily say mine did not.
Yeah, and I followed some of the trends. I was big into the Fast and Furious type scene. I had a Mazda Speed 3 that I, had blacked out headlights and taillights, which, by the way, please never, ever smoke your taillights. It is the dumbest thing. It might look great on your car, but trust me from experience, in a snowstorm, it is not fun to potentially almost get rear-ended every time you hit your brakes because someone can't see your brake lights. Not me personally almost being rear-ended in that car. That car suffered a terminal
Catastrophic.
catastrophic motor explosion where the piston literally came out of the side of the aluminum block because um, it came down to a mixture of two things. I was kind of being an idiot, I'll be honest, in trying to just get the engine revved up a little bit, but I wasn't bouncing the rev limiter on it. But I definitely was trying to show off a little bit to a Corvette that was next to me leaving Cars and Coffee. But then on top of that, there was also a factory defect in the motor, in the actual cylinder head, that went unnoticed until we found the cylinder head, and Mazda took a look at everything, and they're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't have pushed this car. And they're like, you were going how fast on the way here? And it didn't blow up. And then you hit 15 miles an hour going over some train tracks, and that jarred it just the right way that it blew the piston out the side of the block.
I don't know if that's lucky or terrible luck.
Well, it was lucky in the place that I ended up getting stranded, but not I for those of you listening, I got stranded 2 blocks away from Michael Jordan's house, in the suburbs of Chicago. So, not the worst place to be stuck in, especially since the lady came outside to offer my friend and I Voss water straight from the fridge on a very hot summer day. Which, to those of you who are also unaware, Voss water is a artisan. It's a luxury artisan water. It's fantastic. To me, it's fantastic in taste. And you're probably going, wait, water? And yes,
yes, water tastes different. Non-sponsored, by the way, but water tastes different.
Yes. So, however, if Voss ever wanted to sponsor us, I would gladly take that sponsorship. Now, that being said, so I remember getting stranded there, but one of the things I saw at that show was someone had shown up in a brand new GT3 from I want to say it was the beginning of the 992 era, not the or I'm sorry, not the 992, the 991.2 era. Or it was actually, no, you know what? I apologize. It was the end of the 997.
I know the car you're talking about because oddly enough, I, did not have as much connection, or I guess rather the word or the phrase would be, maybe not connection, but time on with Porsche. Like I said, my connection to Porsche was literally across the continental U.S. and hours once a year plane ride away. But I know the car I'm talking about because that's what started really, because I brought up more close to home, because I used to go to car shows on here with the 66 convertible Mustang. And similarly, it wasn't Cars and Coffee, I think you said, right? But I saw this, I think what you're talking, same, not same car, but same model car. And I just fell in love with it. I really, really did.
And yeah, so it was a 997 GT3 RS in that bright electric green. And I remember just absolutely loving that car. I spent like hours talking to the owner, who was doing something with his life that I wanted to do, which was being a commercial airline pilot.
Did you get to sit in the car? Mine was theme like a Twilight Gray so much. I was a dark metallic, the one that I can't remember his name. I have pictures with him and all that, somewhere in my computer logged away. Did you get to similarly talk to him and find out what he did and that kind of stuff? But did you get to did you let you sit in the car? I get let me sit in the car. I didn't get to drive it.
So that
for riding it afterwards too. Oh,
that time I did not get to sit in it.
Oh,
the following month,
it's getting to ride. Oh man.
So the Cars and Coffee around here transfers between two cities that are fairly good distance away from each other, but it brings different crowds to each. Unfortunately, and for reasons of people doing burnouts and being stupid, they don't do it in the one location where I had the Mazda blow up on me.
Hmm.
anymore. However, it does go between um, uh, Barrington, Illinois, and Bolingbrook, Illinois now. Um, Cycles between those two locations, but they've always kind of done it at the Bolingbrook Promenade.
Hmm.
Um, and the Bolingbrook location was, I remember pulling up there. My Mazda was gone at this point. I remember pulling up there in our 98 Ram pickup because that was the only car left. And I he had just pulled in. It was him, and there was a uh, bright orange, and I want to say it was sunburst orange, but I'm not 100%
I
certain.
think, yeah, I know
But
what car you're talking
but there was
about.
the electric green and there was the bright
Uh-huh.
orange, and they parked right next to each other.
Those are the two most obnoxious colors
Well, until
in the best way.
the sky blue with orange accents showed up,
Oh dear God,
and
that actually, I usually love the obnoxious stuff. That I did not like at all.
yeah, I was not a fan of that one. However, I did get to sit in the orange one.
Okay.
So I was talking to the guy with the electric green again, and he had come down from the old location, and he was kind
Hmm.
of like, oh, there's a couple of us down here that have the GT3 RSs, and here's this lineup, and oh, this guy, I'm sure will let you sit in his. And I remember getting into it, and it was the first year they put Alcantara in.
Mm.
And so he had the Alcantara steering wheel with the big orange line for dead center, and the
Yep.
racing wheel. And I remember sitting in it, and he let me
Did you
rev it
like
up a
it?
little. Oh God, I loved it.
I see. I didn't. I when I got to interestingly enough, when I got to sit in the gentleman's on the wasn't car again cars and cop, it was a car show. I That was my first experience with Alcantara, and I to this day I'm slowly turning towards it on,
I
like,
don't
let's say,
I
like
don't like when the
non high
Alcantara.
touch surfaces, like not
Yeah,
steering wheels and seats with like headliners and dashes and so on. I remember I getting out of that car, I did not like Alcantara. I point blank did
at the
not like
time I
it.
didn't like Alcantara. The so my mom's new car right now, she's got a 2018 Mazda CX-5. That one's got kind of a weird mix of Alcantara lined by leather throughout. Not the dashboard. The dashboard, I believe, is leather, but it's like the driver's seat in her car. I actually don't mind it. I think it's a little more comfortable to have in the center of the seat. But the crushed velvet looking Alcantara from a couple years ago,
Yeah.
when
Oh, that's
Alcantara
yep.
was first coming in, that was hideous. It was
Yeah, that's what I
hideous.
hated.
Yep.
So let me ask you
So
this question for the people. One thing I've noticed, I remember back to, is there were two Porsches, and Nick, you know that I have distinct, I have a different opinion, both good, for the GT models versus the standard. And I remember going to that car show, and it was a GT3, and then a 911, a little bit like a year older, but of the same of the previous generation, I think. And for some reason, the people struck me differently. The one the guy who owned the 911 was very standoffish. You know, just kind of didn't answer a whole lot of questions. Didn't really care because I was a kid. I was still a kid, right? Like what I think this was like around high school or like middle school ish type, and it was just it wasn't a good experience. And then you have the guy who's, I think, arguably got the more expensive car, for example, right? And the other guy might have been more like your typical Porsche owner, potentially stereotypical, Porsche 911 owner, in my opinion. But the other guy was like, like his car was a Ford Focus, brand new car, same as what you were dealing. But let me sit in it. Took me, answered any question I had. Even took me afterwards for a ride just around like downtown streets, and it was insane. And he didn't have to. And I don't know. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I feel like maybe similar to your, the person who bought, obviously, who, the kind of person who got you into Porsche and kept you in for the entire course of, frankly, it sounds like your entire life. It really comes down to the people can have the bigger effect than maybe even the car. Because I don't know, frankly, had they all stereotypical Porsche, owner, I still probably would have been stuck in the mind of I only get to see a Porsche really once a year and drive a Porsche once a year, kind of idea. I don't
Sure.
know. I don't know if you had the same experience, but that's one of the things that stuck out to me is this. You would think that he had no inclination with how expensive his car was, and I knew what it was, obviously, but he treated it like a Ford Focus in the best way, where it wasn't
Well,
anything
and
untouchable,
that's
for even as
exactly
a
what the
kid.
guy said when I walked over to him, and the guy that had the electric green said, "Hey,
Hmm.
go over and talk to him. I'm sure he'll let you sit in his." Um,
Yeah,
when
it
I walked
totally
over and I
changes.
asked him, I said, "Hey, I was talking to this guy. I met him at the last one. Would it at all be possible for me to just sit?" And he goes, "Absolutely." And he opened the door for me and he goes, "Your butt isn't going to do anything more than mine is."
Yep.
And I sat in it and I revved it up a little bit, and the sound of a turbocharged well, actually the GT3 RS at the time was not turbocharged, but the
But
sound of that flat six just is amazing and will always give me goosebumps.
I wish I should have asked if I could start it up and rev it. Like I got to ride in it, but I'm sure that's an experience that even just getting it
It,
like in a parking lot, stationary, getting to rev it.
yeah, and I had that experience once before with the Nissan GTR community.
Oh,
The
okay.
Someone offered me the keys to his GTR just to rev it up and not to move it, but
See,
to
that's
rev it
so
up
weird
and
because I had that with the Corvette community too. I was a Headwaters Corvette show, and it was right when I think it was 2006, right when the sixth generation of the Corvette, entire redesign, like first one, and the guy tossed me the keys to his brand new, a week black, Corvette. Same experience that you sounds like you had with the GTR community. That's
well, and that's so I had that experience again, but it always it Porsche kind of for that period of time was always just in the back of my head. I always thought they were cool, but they didn't stick out to me.
yeah, I
Um,
would agree to that too.
but
I
I
mean,
would
it probably comes down to the styling though. Like if you don't kind of like what when my main, if you don't know what to appreciate in it, you're going to default to the looks and the kind of the looks it gets. And Porsches aren't crazy looking, right? So it kind of falls if you don't understand,
it
if you
it's
don't appreciate it or respect the behind the
right.
scenes, yeah, it
And
falls
at
to
the
the back
time
of your
they
mind.
had the Carrera GT, and there was a guy who had a Carrera GT there, and well, there was a guy
But
who
would
showed
you
up with
argue
a
that while that's a
Veyron
great car,
there.
I've never thought like when you put a Carrera GT even up against a Ferrari or a Lamborghini of the time period, it's the Carrera GT still looked
It was
more
subdued.
not that's the word, yes, subdued. So yeah,
So
I totally get what you're talking about.
so to prevent us from going just absolutely too long, I will cut ahead a little bit. Kind of stayed in the back of my mind until and I have remained a member of the Porsche Club in North America, just as a
Hmm.
spectator member. Um, and the Midwest district put out a notice and kind of call to their members saying, "Hey, on this day in August in 2019," and at the time I was living in Wisconsin, and they said, "Hey, Porsche, the North America, the company wants to bring our local members to a closed private session at Road America where we would get to drive their entire lineup." And I quickly said yes. And then also quickly turned around because they said you'd be able to film it and talk to my brother. And so the
Hmm.
two of us on, I want to say, and I'm sure I could check the date on my pass because my pass to that experience event is also hanging up on my wall. It was the beginning of August. It could have been even the 1st of August. Um, But we went to Road America. It was shut down for the day for us to go and do whatever we wanted and whatever Porsche had designed. We checked in. We had to sit through like almost a timeshare presentation from Delta Private Jets, which is their corporate sponsor, not a sponsor of us. And, after that, we had a chance to win like a year's worth of tickets on their thing if we put our name in, and then we got to go out and look at the lineup, and we got grouped in, I believe it was Group A. So we went out first, and the first thing we did was drive the Macan and the Cayenne. Brand new models. And they took us around the old road course, which is now public streets for Road America around Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And again, there's a video of all of this on Zach's YouTube channel. Look around the beginning of August of 2019 if you're trying to find it. It's the Porsche experience. But we went out, we drove the Cayenne, we drove the Macan. I think the Macan still to this day has too many buttons. But I just remember taking some of the curves in the Cayenne and the Macan and going, wow, this thing actually handles itself well, and these are base models.
Which one or both?
I think the Cayenne was an S, but the Macan was a base model. And I just remember sitting there and going, yeah, this is definitely a base model, but it feels pretty rock solid, especially with...
But it's still a Porsche.
Right, it's still a Porsche. And it was comfortable. Zach and I both drove it. We swapped out, got into the Macan, did basically the same route again, felt super comfortable, parked up, and then they walked us over to the track where they had lined up helmets, they had lined up these USB sticks that we all had to take, and they had lined up in alternating pattern 992 911 pre-release. So it was some of the first production cars, and we were our group was the first group to drive the 992 on a racetrack in North America outside of the dealerships and the performance folks. So we were some of the first regular people to drive this car. And they wanted our feedback, which is why we had to have USB sticks, and they took our telemetry data, and we got to keep a copy of the video. I think those videos are up on Zach's other channel, Shooting Laps. But we went out, and I just remember them saying, does anybody here have actual racing experience? And Zach and I kind of raised our hands a little bit, and Zach's like, I've been wheel-to-wheel once, and I've been wheel-to-wheel once, and just amateur racing. They're like, cool, you're going with the fast people. And I went, oh, okay. And they stuck us behind the wheel of the 992, and I thought they were going to go like 75, 80 miles an hour. But we had an instructor in the lead car who... and we came to find out was a professional Le Mans race car driver for Porsche. And he was giving us some instructions, and honestly, it felt like a Forza video game because the guy had a very thick British accent. And I remember rounding the carousel, and he's like, all right, we're coming up to this curve. We're going to use the kink because we want the longest straightaway possible. So we come up to the kink, and he's like, all right, punch it. And then he just took off. And I just remember going, okay, here we go. And I just jammed my foot as far into the floor as possible and just let the 992 take off. Oh, man. And
I've heard some of, I haven't heard all of this before, to those of you listening. I've heard, I'd say 60% of this from the sounds of it. And I've seen the videos, and it's just... every time I just think, holy crap, wow.
It's goosebumps. It's an adrenaline rush unlike anything else that I've experienced. And I mean that honestly. I would almost go as far as to say It is one of the greatest feelings I've ever had. If not the greatest feeling, is just letting that car go and do what it was meant to do. And these were 992 Carrera S's. So slightly upgraded performance. Brand new carbon ceramic brakes, which, by the way, if you're breaking in carbon ceramic brakes, it smells like tortilla chips. We all had the same complaint at the end of the day because they had just put brand new brakes on the cars. Is that we all smelled like tortilla chips afterwards. That's the carbon ceramics breaking in. And I mean, we pushed it. There is video footage of me in Zach's video in the Panamera GTS at over 150 miles an hour. And the most surprising thing was that the GTS, the Panamera GTS, kept up with the 992. Now, obviously, the Turbo S, that's
kept
now
being different than beating, but
yeah, well, absolutely. And the Panamera,
you also weren't trying to Turbo S, right? I think the even shocking thing is you would think that this kind of stuff might come from even as a Porsche, to top level Porsche, and it still wasn't. And that says something, right?
Yeah, and at the time there were only a couple models of the 992 available. There was the base model, the S, the 4, the 4S, the cabriolets, and I think the Turbo.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's the Turbo S, which obviously is the pinnacle of the non-race spec, or I call them Saturday shooters.
Saturday shooters.
Going out to the track on Saturdays and racing them.
That makes sense.
The showdowns are
I generally stick to the like you said, non-racing.
Showdowns or shoot-offs usually is what those events are called on Saturdays, where you bring the track toy out and you mess around with it. In every sense of the word, or every sense of the phrase, I agree with Jeremy Clarkson and James May when they say that the GT3 RS is a 911 with no comfort and scaffolding in the back. It really is. But to be able to do what I can't even fathom right now, and I've driven the S on the track flat out, to know what the Turbo S is capable of, yet you still have all the luxury comforts and back seats, is incredible to me.
Yeah, and that's why I think we talked about this often at the auto shows. If I had my choice, I might not be able to beat a GT3, on the track with a 911 Turbo S, but I would absolutely take.
Well, as it sits right now, you'd be able to.
Well, but at the very least, I'd be able to keep up with it, even if not beat it. Maybe I think we actually looked at this, and you'd be able to beat it in. What was it? I think one would edge out in the corners, one would edge out in the straights. But that said, you still have all the comfort.
Well, and when we were comparing, when we were comparing the 991.2s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different ballgame now with the current Turbo S's, and that's something.
Yeah, it's closed the gap considerably, but you got to think, even if they're on an equal playing field, like you're saying, like if you get the racing spec models, you get more than just the car, in driver schools and blah blah.
Right.
But at the same time, if I had the choice to get just one or even two, I would still get the 911, Turbo S first, because it could be a Saturday shooter. It could be, if I wouldn't.
It could be a weekend track car.
Yeah, you could leave it outside and be a daily driver. Or start it up in the Midwest winters or in the summers. I mean, it's made to be what it is, plus all of the comfort. I mean,
yeah, it's a versatile and capable vehicle that is really the pinnacle of performance, in my personal opinion. Now,
I would agree.
So we go through the event. They bring us out on the go-kart track and we drive the Caymans, the 718 Caymans. Had a blast doing that.
Real fun little cars.
Then they brought us back, and they put us in that Panamera, the extremely long-named one that I'm not going to take back off the wall to read. But the Sport Turismo, the hybrid Sport Turismo. And feeling the gut punch of the all-wheel drive system and the electronics working together to create so much torque it literally made my fingertips numb. And I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not saying that because I was excited. I literally felt the blood leave my fingertips, and when he hit the brakes the first time, going into that first corner, all of a sudden I had a blood rush back to my fingertips, and they got like that weird hot needly feeling. I was like, oh, okay, so we're literally playing with G-forces. I mean, that's the only other time I've ever felt that was in a small aircraft. So, and playing with G-forces and things like that with light aircraft. But either way, I remember leaving that day. Yeah, I remember leaving that day with my love for Porsche fully reinstated, and in the highest degree it's ever been. And since then, it's been a little over a year now. It hasn't stopped. And the one thing I want to cap off with, and this is where Matt and I disagree, is that the auto show, the Chicago Auto Show, this past this year, right before the pandemic. Thank goodness, because I'm glad we got to go.
Becoming a tradition for.
Has been a tradition for me. Is becoming more and more of a tradition for the two of us.
For me as well, but like going to actually together and with Zach.
Well, because it typically falls on my birthday, so usually we go for my birthday. So that has always been kind of.
What I will say is, to give a little background, you were hot off, going here. I think you were this high.
Yeah.
So tell me about it, and for those, if you need any indication about the validity to what you're saying, Nick, is that Nick just telling me and showing me this stuff and keeping me up to date through all of this reaffirmed my love for Porsche in perpetuity, let alone someone who actually went through it. So,
well, exactly, and that's
we're both arguably on this Porsche coming into the auto show. Go kind of made sure to spend time there versus just walk.
And we spent, I think, out of all the booths, we spent the most time in the Porsche booth.
We if you remember, we went most time there and went back at least twice.
Yes.
Separate occasions.
Yes, because we needed to take more pictures of whatever we were looking at. But
and one of those things,
one of those things, is the differences in the two models of Cayenne that are currently available. There is a SUV, and there is a coupe. I personally strongly dislike the rear end of the coupe.
Now, I think that because of that, Nick's on, because I love it.
And to each their own, and I think that's what also makes Porsche a fantastic company, is there is something for everyone.
Well, you want to talk about a fantastic company? I mean, yes, I think I'm willing. What's I don't know if the boys, quote unquote, ever said the Top Gear boys, but other channels and other topics that I'm not going to bring up here, they say things to the effect of, and if it doesn't look cool, then what's the point after all, right? So my point to the Cayenne is, the coupe SUV versus the standard SUV is, I'm willing to sacrifice practicality and pay more, sacrifice trunk or boot space for our non-US listeners here, for cool, because I think the coupe looks a lot cooler than the standard Cayenne.
Spoiler, literally.
We're not talking about that dirty little secret.
The thing that I always push, well, as of today, because
that doesn't count.
As of today, I've been pushing Matt's buttons on the spoiler on the Cayenne coupe because
that doesn't count.
It does to me, and it's hideous.
I'm ignoring it. I would agree. If it existed, it's hideous.
Okay, Loch Ness Monster. Yeah, it is definitely. I would say it is the number one thing that I can say and to be realistic here, Porsche is not some god of a company. They have definitely made their mistakes. I think the 996 wasn't the best looking car in the world. I think obviously the Panamera originally was a hot pile of garbage. I personally don't like the Cayenne coupe. However, if you have one, I would rather you have a Porsche than something else.
Everyone can have an opinion. Yours is.
Yeah.
But here's the
So,
thing: you can bring up that spoiler all you want, wing, whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to be seeing it. I just have to make sure that it's in your view and my rear view the entire. So
well, if it's in your rear view, that means you can see it, and you're going to be grossed out by it.
that's
But
it.
anyway, that's no,
Good point.
I
I probably crash and twist it. Then you're right. Hey, make sure that I can't see it and you can see it. I gotta stay in front of you.
well, either way, it's always something that I've learned is the sign of a good company is that you're able to adapt to whatever your customers are looking for.
Well, and
And
maybe a no better sign of that would be them coming out with. I don't remember what generation it was, but I think you pointed out to me the fact that you can have I think from Porsche, like a factory quote unquote radio with Apple CarPlay installed into an older model Porsche that has a quote
yes, they
unquote
did run that.
analog radio. I mean, how incredible is it? I mean,
I think
you
dating
don't
back to
see
the
that.
1997 models.
That you don't see that it's not just the cars, it's not just
Well,
even
and
no
that's
matter how much you pay the various options and driver schools and whatever, but it's even stuff like that. And even to your point, the kind of company they are, and yes, again, they're not. I think Nick's right. They're not God. It's just everyone has a
there's no
favorite,
there's
right?
no company that's perfect. Everybody has their ups and
Yes,
downs. I just
but
think
Porsche
that
is unique in a lot of
Porsche
ways.
Porsche is unique in a lot of ways, and then on top of that, something that I've learned is the sign of a good company is your ability to cover the entire market. So for the family going mom who doesn't necessarily really care about which car she's driving, and she
She can
just
drive the ugly Cayenne or the Macan.
well, you can get a Cayenne if you've got, you know, dad who used to have a 911 and now has 3 kids and is reevaluating his life choices. There's a Panamera GTS waiting for him.
True.
You know, if you
For the
need
27-year-old banker who likes to take, quote, any lane is a turn lane in a Porsche if you go quick enough, there's the 911.
there's the 911. And if you want something that's fast, incredible, and green, not in color but in environmental status, now they have the Taycan. Or they
And
have the hybrids, the hybrid selection of the Panamera Cayenne.
and if you want
And
something that's still fun and getting yet afford, a 911 or top level like a Cayenne GTS or whatever or top level Panamera, hey, then you can always go with what the 718, as well.
the 718, and then if you want a track day car, you've got your choice of the Cayman GT4 Club Sport, you've got the
Mm-hmm.
911, you've got the GTS, you've got the
I mean, one could argue with solid, the engineering of the. Keep going back to it.
and it
Technically,
and if you
some would be
just
more fun than others. You could track day any of those things and be fine.
and if you want to be like the guy who lives about a mile down the road and you just want to make everybody drool as they drive by, you could buy an electric green 918 Spider and just leave it in your driveway on summer days. So there's
Yeah.
so much that brand, and there are other brands that have that filling,
Oh yeah.
but to what extent? And I think Porsche does it all and does it the best out of anybody else right now.
It's that they service their customers and their quality. Well, it is the benchmark to be compared, to right. Even so much as you were saying before we got on here, you can go back and how meticulous they are and over engineered they are. Not just the cars, but the company, to where you could look up old, factory codes and information dating back to God knows when online, or
Well,
you
and
can look up
that's
in any Porsche model, year and see all the factory codes and all the specifics on what that car has, and you don't see that a whole lot anywhere else. It's just the attention to detail, the quality, the over engineering that sets them apart
and
in
it's
a
over
better
engineering in the best possible way. It's
and,
not
and yeah,
it's
in a
not
different
overbearing engineering. It's
exactly.
engineering to the tiniest detail in the best possible way. And I
They are
think
unique in a lot of ways, and unique over other manufacturers that are even similar or, have, like you said, the same offer. They just do it differently. And I'll argue do it better.
And I agree. And if by chance, one, you're still listening to the podcast, thank you very much. Two, if you are listening to the podcast and you happen to work in Porsche's marketing, in their, whether North America or in Germany, hello. I'm going to get
Hello.
real nervous here and tell you thank you. And you do such fantastic work, because I very rarely see car companies or automotive manufacturers in general do the marketing work that Porsche does
Mm-hmm.
with their partnership on the duet with Embraer.
Well, I think it goes
Their
farther than that too, though. I mean, I think,
oh, much
like I
further.
was telling you, that for that the word is perfect, but there are, and I think you'd agree, Nick, that if any of those people do happen to listen to this at some point ever, it's one thing to be a great car company and a great, seller of cars in the same company or of anything, right? But oftentimes you see if they're great at cars, they're not so great at marketing, or they're really great at marketing because they're selling an inferior product and they don't focus so much on that, right? Maybe some, lesser quality brands, or maybe more run.
And to
Porsche
kind of to
does it
to kind
all
of follow that
well.
whole subtlety, it's not usually a big deal when a Porsche video comes out on YouTube, because it's almost
Mm-hmm.
daily. But I
Mm-hmm.
am subscribed and I do have my notifications turned on. And I there have been time well, and their Twitch stream last year, I want to say it was about this time when they released the first livery look at the 99X, and they had the interactive playthrough where people voted which way you went, and you got to play the game, and you got to unlock the 99X, their Formula E car,
Mm-hmm.
through playing
Yeah.
an interactive game on Twitch. Was extremely fun, so well put together. And I have to give my props to Porsche's marketing. Time and time again, whether it's a small video, an update video, a video showing a guy making a phone call. I believe this was on the German one. I had to translate it. Making a phone call to the dealership and saying, "Hey, I need to bring in my," I think he said Model 91, and they said, "You mean 911?" And he goes, "No, Model 91." And they're like, "Oh, okay, we can take care of that." And it's all these people looking around. They pull these books off the shelf and they're dusting them off. And he pulls in one of the original Porsche tractors.
I
And
think I've seen that video. You made me. I don't
it
remember the car, but
it's so. And the thing is, they still do have those manuals sitting on the
yep.
shelf. And I know that because I just pulled up the entire color pattern from 1986, the color palette for the 911 and the Carrera models from, yeah, I believe it was 1986 that I had just
Well, I
pulled
mean, I
the
think you hit
names
the
and
nail on the
colors.
head, though. Oddly enough, the other day I was looking for something to look at. I got curious, and I was even going through old Porsche, like driver, videos on YouTube that weren't even made in the current anywhere near the current date, but it still seemed relevant to today. So their marketing and the content that they are consistently putting out transcends even, I'd say, the time periods that they're doing it in, right? And I think the other day my grandparents sent me a video in an email where, much to like the tractor kind of thing, it was an old man and his son, and as a surprise, I don't remember the car, but it was, maybe it was fake, maybe it was real, maybe it was marketing. If it was the stewardship that Porsche took of this, old man's car, and his son getting it restored as a surprise. That's what I think of when I think of Porsche in another way, where, yeah, they would, help me restore my father's car to pristine that sat in a barn as a surprise, because that's the kind of company they are. And they'd make sure that it was to my and their exacting specifications just to make my father happy.
Well,
Like,
exactly. So
that was probably marketing, but I mean, it's just, you don't see that from anybody else.
no, and As much as I would love to continue this conversation, we are hitting almost the 2-hour point of the
We should
podcast.
probably end it this week.
For those of you who have made it this far, thank you for listening to us ramble. Thank you for hearing our passions. If you are from Porsche, please feel free to reach out to us or if you're not from Porsche and you just want to reach out to us, please email us at podcast@redlineresorts.com.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you later.
Thanks for sticking with us. You can find us on social media. We're Redline Resorts, at Redline Resorts on, I think, everything at this point. So, again, you can email us either general info about Redline Resorts at info@redlineresorts.com, or you can send us an email specifically about the podcast topics you might want to cover. Anything along with that, sent to podcast@redlineresorts.com. Again, that's podcast@redlineresorts.com. That is the checkered flag on this week. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Please make sure to check out our social medias, emails. I'm Nick. That's Matt. And we will definitely see you next time.